Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Moser's Director of Personnel. We're happy that you could join us for this episode of Ask Anything because today we're talking with another one of our own, Casey Poschinger, Senior Consultant within our Core Technologies Division, who's going to be talking to us about how to leverage AI to close the gender gap of women in the tech industry. Casey is a Service Delivery Manager and Senior Consultant with Moser Consulting. She specializes in SharePoint and Microsoft Office 365. With a passion for technology since childhood, Casey has been officially working in the IT field since 2007. Additionally, Casey advocates for young women to get involved in STEM careers, promoting diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. Currently residing in Indianapolis for 11 years, Casey, along with her husband and two children, is actively involved in her local community. Before we begin with our topic, let's welcome our guest, Casey. Casey, how are you?
I'm doing good, Angel. Thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. Well, we're super happy that you could join us today. So let's talk about gender diversity in the tech industry. Why is this important, and how does it impact the industry?
Well, I have been, as you said, been working in the industry since 2007. Obviously, I've been interested in it longer than that. I would have to say that I have been probably in a more male-dominated industry since 2007, with joining also the service. And I've noticed that in those two industries, there have been a lack of women overall in general. There have been hits or misses in those two industries, of course. Challenges here and there, of course, between the two. Some things that people would think that are difficult may have not always been as difficult that they think would have been, and things that people wouldn't have thought would have been difficult have been difficult. And as I have worked my way through this industry, I have investigated why I'm not seeing as many women in the IT field as I originally thought, because I have developed a love so much for it. And just what stood out to me the most is just the numbers alone. Probably before COVID, I would say we were at I believe, a 28 to 30% rate of women in the IT field alone, which actually just is really low. And even
Yeah.
since COVID, we've actually kind of dropped down to, I think, 22%. And I could be wrong on those numbers, so don't quote me on those. But we have dropped. So, things like AI that are coming out right now, we can actually utilize to help kind of close that gender gap, because one of the things that AI is helping do is utilize some of those non-technical skills that women may have that we can use to bring them into the tech force.
And I mean, I got to say, I think the numbers pre and post COVID are really alarming just because obviously pre COVID, it was just the interest in IT and getting women and girls interested in STEM that was hard. Now, after COVID, especially because a lot of people stayed at home and they found a way to just stay at home for longer. So a lot of people left their careers. And so that added to that, obviously, that drop in numbers that you mentioned. But I really want to learn more a little bit about how you view AI and how it can help lower that gap a little bit more for women.
Yes, well, like I was saying, I mean, using AI to utilize more of those non-technical skills. So, for example, any kind of like technology within AI that can address some of the biases in the workforce. I'm probably going to address some of the uncomfortable situations here, but any kind of harassments and violations of privacy, any kind of realities of any biases and discriminations that AI systems can lead into generative AI and biases of stereotypes. Tech firms can actually analyze these through data sets and encourage any kind of diversity within teams to kind of address these and ensure that these are all working fairly amongst these groups. But this is where they can utilize AI tools to kind of reinforce these roles, and that may perpetuate some of these negative stereotypes within the workforce that may be actually discouraging women from joining that. So that could actually kind of pave the way for women to actually start entering in more into that workforce.
That's a lot of good information. And so let's move on to this next piece of this topic, there are many places that are currently working on this topic. Places like Cornell University with its Curie Academy, where they provide residential program for high school girls interested in STEM. The Girls Who Code Summer Immersion Program, which focuses on building confidence and fostering a supportive community of girls interested in tech, to just name a few. How can we continue to promote STEM education among girls and young women?
Well, Indie Women in Tech is an organization that is local that will actually do that. It is a organization that I have kind of been interested in, and before COVID, I kind of reached out to them a bit, and they actually do a golf outing every year to bring in women to volunteer, as well as actually girls around different schools to also volunteer to talk about different options within STEM. They also ask different women in the STEM environments to come and talk to these girls and participate within days such as what's called Ignite Your Superpower STEM Day. Middle school girls can participate in certain things like hands-on experiments and different interactive exhibits that will inspire these girls to discover STEM more. So it's kind of like starting early on to get them interested into it in school, and basically getting them a love for it early on. So getting them started right there before they even hit college, before they even hit secondary school, I think is a good way to really to get them on a path going forward.
Yeah, we've worked with Indie Women in Tech in the past. I know that Moser has, as an organization, we've provided some of our leaders to speak in events, and they've used actually our facilities to hold one of their meetings. So they're really powerful when it comes to that here locally in Indiana, because they provide that opportunity for school age young women to kind of see the STEM field, kind of see somebody who looks like them, who maybe went through the path that they're going through right now, and just develop their skill set and just get an interest in the field and know that there is so much more in STEM and the tech field in general that can be provided to young women. So I think they're really some good work there. So how can companies create an inclusive environment for women in AI?
Well, I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier with the AI, with utilizing the technology for the data sets and databases for leveraging diversity and inclusion for recruitment processes and marketing campaigns to do that. That, like I said, they could pave the way for that, but then they can also utilize those to address certain skills that aren't technical that they can use within AI to use within the technical field to actually, how do I put this? So they can use certain skills that aren't necessarily considered technical with AI to actually use within the technical field to kind of bridge that gap, not only within the gender gap, but also bridge the gap between non-technical and technical, if you understand what I'm getting at. So you're upskilling and reskilling women to kind of unlock their full potential within AI, because AI obviously is taking out of the equation certain skills that we no longer have to use on our own, and it's doing it for us, so to speak.
Yeah.
So AI is doing things for us, right? So by doing it for us, we are able to bring more women into the tech field, but we're utilizing the skills that aren't necessarily technical, and we are able to use them in AI and use their non-technical skills and bring them into the tech field.
Yeah, so basically AI is allowing us to bring more women by having them utilize their non-technical skills so that they can transition maybe to the tech field in a way that it wasn't possible maybe 10, 20 years ago, right?
Correct. So, as me, like for example, I'm kind of like that old school tech, whereas I learned from the ground up, right? And I am encountering a younger generation that isn't necessarily learning that anymore because we don't use it anymore. And
Mhm.
I'll be honest, there is some kind of frustration there, and there is some kind of gap there between me and the younger generation sometimes where we don't always understand, or we don't always meet eye to eye because they don't understand that foundation, and they don't know that
Right.
foundation of how that got there or how that was built. But with AI, we can, like I said, bridge that gap. Probably helps if I speak more on certain skills, like, leveraging emotional intelligence, abstract thinking, to kind of build a symbiosis with technical proficiency. And we can use AI to do that.
Well, I think it goes back to something you just mentioned, and it's that I don't want to sound like an old man on a park bench talking about paying your dues. But when you came up 11, 12 years ago, when you were starting off and maybe your interest sparked on IT, because none of the tools that we have now that are available at our disposal right now really very easily to learn some things that weren't there 10, 11 years ago, it was, for lack of a better term, harder. And you had to pay your dues. You had to learn to be in the tech field in a way that was very different than what it is right now. That, we both have young children that if they were interested in getting into the tech field 5, 10 years from now, probably going to take them maybe even half, if not more than half the time that it probably took you to get into tech or me to get into HR, because of those
Hmm.
tools that are available to them right now when it comes to education. And AI really provides that. And I don't know, I'm talking about educating oneself, but
Right.
it can certainly be something that we can posit into this conversation, because learning IT 10, 20 years ago was different than what it is right now.
Right. And what's funny is, you say it's more difficult then because of the different skills or what we had to pay our dues, which we did. But I almost want to look at it as a different kind of difficulty, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty then doesn't mirror the difficulty now. So let me explain. So our difficulty then was having to pay our dues and work our way up. Whereas how I look at it now, the difficulty now for them would be, yes, they do have more of the ease of the technology at hand, but the difficulty for them now is keeping up with the pace, I would
Right.
say.
Yeah, no,
So that's
that's a
their
great point.
difficulty is, can they keep up with the fast pace? And can they get ahead by racing with everyone else? Can they
Yeah,
keep
no,
up with the competition?
that's a great point, Casey, because as you were just saying that, I was thinking, maybe 11, 12 years ago, it wasn't this way, but
Hmm.
back in the early 2000s, when we were thinking about, the .NET bubbles and all that stuff and the Y2K, like most of the stuff was really in books. The
Right.
internet wasn't fully developed the way it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago when you were starting up. So even you had an advantage over those people 12 years before you, because they were probably reading it from a textbook instead of what I'm assuming you probably did was just reading stuff on the internet and getting you caught up, and maybe complementing that with textbooks as well. But right now, textbooks are almost obsolete. They're almost like you can get them online, you can get them in a PDF, and so people never actually touch a piece of paper, which to me it's mind-boggling, because I enjoy, there's nothing more that I enjoy than grabbing a good book and just sitting down and reading it. But now it's like, no,
Hmm.
you just press a screen to the right or to the left, you swipe left or right, and that's it. That's how you get your information.
Right. Exactly. Just to backtrack a little, and I know, we've been talking about moving forward, but, another way AI can, kind of utilize this, and I'm saying backtrack and kind of utilizing some of the, what I quote unquote utilize the non-technical skills for women. And I'm probably going to point out a little more stereotypical. And don't get me wrong, not all women are like this, but in general, there are certain skills that women too tend to have in general that aren't being utilized fully or recognized fully to an extent that are kind of women are shying away from or not necessarily realizing to their fullest extent because of a fear there of maybe they're not, I don't know, I think there's still a fear there that they feel like they're going to fail at something like
Mm-hmm.
this, or that this is intimidating, but they don't realize that in a way they can actually do a lot better than they think. For one, attention to detail. For example, my recently I just got my master's degree in IT project management, and across the board,
Congratulations.
thank you, I appreciate that. Um, I mean, across the board, especially in IT project management, I have heard time and time again, even from my professors, that in general, I'm speaking in general, that women, because of their attention to detail, tend to actually make the better IT project managers because of that skill. And yes, that does not translate across everyone, but it is a skill that does tend to resonate more with women than men. And it is a skill that isn't being fully utilized in the IT field with women because, again, we are only at 28%.
Right. Yeah, it's a very low number, and as you mentioned, it might have just dropped a little bit more after post COVID, I should say. So we just got to get back up. We got to get the interest. We got to make sure that young women who are listening to this maybe get something out of it, and they understand that they are the future for this field. So before we go, that segues nicely into my last question for you. What advice do you have for any young women who might be listening to this and might be thinking this might be for me?
Be comfortable with getting uncomfortable. It sounds
Mhm.
weird, but don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, know when to put up your barriers, because as someone who grew up as a people pleaser, it took a long time for me to finally put up those barriers and finally get to a point to where I had to learn how to say no in a way to where it would help me. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning not to put so much on my plate, because I will say this, women do tend to put a lot on their plate.
Mhm.
There are women who are generally, it is something in the workforce that it is perceived as saying no from a woman isn't necessarily considered a good thing. But don't be afraid to actually put up those barriers early on. And again, don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Casey Poschinger, it's been a pleasure to have you with us on Ask Anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to Casey Poschinger talk to us about how to leverage AI to close the gender gap of women in the tech industry. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts on what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.